Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ. Welcome to this live broadcast of Pope Leo XIV's greeting to the Giro d'Italia cyclists as they pass through Vatican City. My name is Kelsey Gussie, and I'll be providing the English language commentary and translations for this event. From wherever you are joining us, we would like to welcome you to this live broadcast. Some of you may be joining us through the Vatican News app, Vatican News English YouTube channel, or our Facebook Live feed. And to all of you joining us through our media partners, EWTN TV, Catholic Faith Network in America, Shalom World TV, Edmadrashan TV, Catholic TV, and our listeners through Luminous Radio India, a very special welcome to all of you. This Giro d'Italia is a professional cycling race which started in Albania on May 9th this year, and it is among the top 3 most important international multi-stage races in the world. Together with the Tour de France and the Vuelta a España, it includes 21 stages, mainly in Italy, hence the name Giro d'Italia, or the turnaround or the run around Italy. Today, there are 159 cyclists, made up of 23 teams and 29 countries. As we see the images of the Vatican Gardens, some of these images may be new to many of you, and these are some of the paths, some of the stops that we will see along the path, the course that the cyclists will take once they enter Vatican City. Now, this event that we're having today that we see with the cyclists, we are waiting for them to actually start at the Baths of Caracalla. So the race will actually start on Italian soil, and this part that we will see, this project to have the Giro d'Italia pass through Vatican City, is going to be seen as the first stage, or mile or kilometer 0 of the actual competition. So the part that we will see here in Vatican City will not be part of the actual race, as the cyclists will be able to take it a bit more easily. It won't be a competition in that sense, but it will offer them exclusive and interesting views of the Vatican Gardens, and you will also be able to, in a sense, ride along with them and see these special parts of the Vatican. Now again, the images we're looking at now, we see a piece of the Berlin Wall, which is one of the roads. This road passing the Berlin Wall is one of the stops that the cyclists will be taking on their journey through the Vatican. And this event honors the memory of Pope Francis, who actually embraced the proposal to have the cyclists pass through Vatican City. It was presented by the Prefect of the Dicastery for Culture and Education, Cardinal José Tolentino de Mendonça, who helped make this event a reality, together with the Governorate of Vatican City State and Athletica Vaticana, which is the Vatican's athletic club. And this pass through Vatican City is actually an event ahead of the Jubilee of Sport, which is scheduled for Saturday, June 14th and Sunday, June 15th. So one of the upcoming smaller jubilees within this Jubilee year that we are celebrating, the Year of Hope. And it is a sort of like a kickoff or a look ahead as we start to prepare for the Jubilee of Sport with this pass through the Vatican City with the professional cyclists. So the idea to have the cyclists pass through the Vatican City actually began 4 years ago during a ceremony which Athletica Vaticana received official membership into the International Union of Cyclists. And the initiative was presented again this past April at the Capitoline Hill here in Rome by the Secretary for the Dicastery for Culture and Education. And as I mentioned, this part of the Giro d'Italia, the cyclists race, will actually start at the Baths of Caracalla, so on Italian soil, and this marks the final stage of the 108th edition of the Giro d'Italia, or this cycling competition. The route that the cyclists will actually be taking through the Vatican will cover roughly a 3-kilometer or 2-mile course, with every meter being rich in history and spiritual significance, interwoven with art, with nature, and a surprising variety of wildlife. Then we will see all that as we follow the cyclists through their journey of Vatican City. And so some of the images you will see will be places or spots within the Vatican walls that many of you might know. And so you'll see, of course, St. Peter's Basilica, and you'll see also Vatican train station and the Governorate Palace area, the Mater Ecclesiae Monastery, which is where Pope Benedict XVI, after he resigned, that's where he lived his last years. You'll see also the heliport. So the Vatican has its own helicopter port, where the helicopter then obviously takes off and lands. And the cyclists will also follow the Vatican walls along the so-called Marian route, which is a symbolic tour of the world made possible by many images of the Mother of God, venerated as patroness in different countries. And we're seeing images now of St. Peter's Square, and actually this morning, Pope Leo XIV, we see now on our screen, had a very busy morning as he began with Holy Mass in St. Peter's Square to close the Jubilee of families, children, grandparents, and the elderly, and immediately after he prayed the Regina Caeli with 70,000 pilgrims from over 131 countries. And we see Pope Leo now greeting a number of people within the walls of Vatican City. And since, as I mentioned, Pope Leo actually celebrated the Mass this morning, the cyclists will actually not be riding through St. Peter's Square or Via Conciliazione, which is the road leading up to St. Peter's Basilica, to ensure that pilgrims can continue to go to the Holy Door. And so we can see that while this is a international competition, there is still this significance of having it in the Vatican and still allowing pilgrims to still partake in their pilgrimages. When the cyclists do start to enter Vatican City, we will see that they will be joined by two organization vehicles, as well as there are support vehicles as well that'll be around just in case to have them ready if anyone is in need of them. Now, the history of the cycling competition, or the Giro d'Italia, dates back to 1909, and the annual race has taken place over 3 weeks between May and June every single year since its beginning, with interruptions only for the First and Second World Wars, and in 1946 and 2020, it wasn't cancelled but solely postponed until it could take place. As you remember, 2020 was also the COVID pandemic. Now, as we continue to see the Vatican drone images, again showing inside the walls of the Vatican, where we are awaiting the cyclists from the Giro d'Italia, who are starting their journey from the Baths of Caracalla, which are a historic part of the Roman history, as they have a lot of history related to them. They are one of the largest and best preserved thermal complexes of ancient times. It was actually, they got their names from the emperor who commissioned them, Emperor Caracalla, between 212 and 216 AD, in the area near the first stretch of the Appian Way. And so that is where the cyclists today have begun their journey to the Vatican as part of this final stage of the Giro d'Italia. While you might not immediately think of the Vatican and its ties to cycling, there is actually a spiritually rich tradition which accompanies the Giro d'Italia, athletes, and indeed the entire cycling and sporting world as they ride through the Vatican gardens today. This is not the first time that a pontiff will greet and, in a sense, partake in this cycling competition. It actually dates back to 1946, when Pope Pius XII actually received the Giro d'Italia cyclists in an audience in the courtyard of San Damaso, or St. Damascus, before the start of the 9th stage from Rome to Perugia in that year. Now, that 29th edition of the Giro was won by Gino Bartali, and the winner of that stage, was Aldo Baita, with Vito Ortelli in the pink jersey. And so after that audience, the cyclists and the entire Giro entourage left the Vatican through the Arch of the Bells and crossed St. Peter's Square by car and by bike. And so that was, again, in 1946 with Pope Pius XII, and once again Pope Pius actually met with the participants of the 33rd Giro d'Italia 4 years later during a general audience in St. Peter's Basilica. Now, the race at that point had actually finished the day before in Rome, but the Pope still met with the cyclists, winners, and all of those who were participated in the general audience. And after the 2 times that Pope Pius XII had received the cyclists, it seems that there had to be a tradition. So, a couple years later, in 1964, so 14 years later, we had Pope Paul VI, who took up the mantle of receiving the participants of the Giro d'Italia. But this time, he received them in Castel Gandolfo, which is one of the Roman towns outside of the city of Rome. I'm sure many of you have heard the name before, because that's also where the popes before Pope Francis had taken their summer vacations, and it is a town which is built on the top of a crater where there is this beautiful lake, and so that's where Pope Paul VI had received the participants in 1964. And the riders continued after this audience with Pope Paul VI. They departed from Rome for Montepulciano, which is a 214-kilometer journey. And now on our screen we can actually see some of the cyclists who are cycling towards the colonnade, Bernini's colonnade there in St. Peter's Square. And so as you see them entering the gate, that means they are crossing the line from Italy into the Vatican, and thus they have entered a new country, one of the interesting countries where you do not have to show your passport to actually get inside. And there you can see a better image of the athletes as they cycle into the Vatican. And as you can see, it's a colorful group of cyclists that we have, as they're also looking at enjoying the scenes of Vatican City. So you see the pink jerseys, which indicates the leader of the general classification, meaning the overall time. Then you have the white jersey, which signifies the best young riders. And the blue jersey is worn by the winner of the mountains classification, and the purple jersey represents the points leader. And we see each one of these jerseys being represented as they head towards Pope Leo. So a pink jersey, white jersey, blue jersey, and purple jersey, again each representing a different classification. And we see now Pope Leo being presented with one of the pink jerseys. And now Pope Francis greeting should be Simon Yates, a British racing cyclist, as well as others who are also present representing the different classifications. And now Pope Leo will address the entire group of cyclists.
Ecco. Buongiorno a tutti, benvenuti in Vaticano.
Good morning and welcome to all of you in the Vatican. It's my pleasure to welcome you here, to welcome you to the last stage of the Giro d'Italia. I hope that for all of you, it will truly be a beautiful day. You know that you are all models for young people all around the world, not just for people in Italy, but for everyone, because cycling is a sport that is important for everyone. Thank you for everything that you are doing. You are all truly models for everyone, and I hope in the way that you have learned how to take care of your heart and body, you are always very aware to what it means to be integrally human. The heart, the mind, and the soul. God bless you.
Last part of the Giro d'Italia. Congratulations to all of you. And may you know that you are always welcome. Here in the Vatican, you are always welcome by the Church, which represents God's love for all people. And the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, come upon all of you and remain with you forever. Congratulations. Tanti auguri a tutti.
Congratulations to all of you.
Congratulations to you. Thank you.
Pope Leo there once again congratulating all of the participants in the Giro d'Italia before they actually make their way through the Vatican Gardens, with many sights that we will see. But again, reminding the cyclists that they have an example to play. They are role models for so many people around the world, whether it be cyclists or just young people who are looking up to cyclists and other professional athletes. Now, as we see, the cyclists are taking a very much needed break as they begin to head into Vatican City. And again, they will be able to go through various stages of the Vatican. Now it's About 159 cyclists from about 29 countries represented here, and actually another one stopping to greet Pope Francis before continuing on this competition, which again in the Vatican has become more of a gesture, a riding gesture. So they are not racing for points or for time here, but simply to experience this. So now we see that the cyclists are making their way past Casa Santa Marta, which was the residence of Pope Francis, and it is the guest house of the Vatican, as they make their way on the back side of St. Peter's Basilica. And that big building that you see behind the basilica is actually an important Vatican building, and we see the cyclists making their way up the hill. And now we see the cyclists making their way again further into Vatican City as they continue this journey. And this route that they are taking is about 2 miles or 3 kilometers. And that building that I had previously mentioned was the Governorate Palace, as now they make their way through the archway. And on their left now, what we're looking at, we see the Vatican museums. Those are the gardens that often people walk out of when they're on their tour of the Vatican Gardens. And you can see now the competition it's no longer competition, as we see the cyclists joking and smiling along as they ride through the Vatican City State. And now they're passing through the quadrangle garden along an avenue dedicated to sports, its very name recalling the races promoted by Pope Pius X in actually the early 20th century. And we see the car in front is actually part of the Giro d'Italia organization, guiding the cyclists on their path. And again, meeting the Giro d'Italia cyclists is actually a tradition that dates back just under 100 years, with Pope Pius XII being the first to actually greet cyclists from the Giro d'Italia. And this tradition then continued with Paul VI, and John Paul II actually also met with some of the cyclists, as we see them racing through the Vatican, passing again through the quadrangle garden and the backside of the Vatican Gardens, as now on their right they pass a piece of the Berlin Wall. The piece of the Berlin Wall was actually gifted to John Paul II, as he did play an important role in establishing dialogue, and which brought about the end of communism during that period of time. And actually the history of the Vatican Gardens is actually closely tied to the development of St. Peter's Basilica and the papal residence nearby. During the early era of the Papal States, this area was known as the Civitas Leonina, named after the defensive walls built by Pope Leo IV to protect against the Saracen invaders. So remnants of these walls still stand on the highest parts of Vatican Hill. Which actually we see that the cyclists have now made their way up to one of the tallest parts of Vatican City. And the Vatican Gardens were established in the mid-13th century, and they have served various purposes. So under Pope Pius IV, in the 16th century, they became a paradise for botanists, and papal envoys were tasked with sending seeds and saplings of exotic trees not native to Italy. So this is how tobacco and chili peppers arrived in the Vatican through the Spanish courts. And the walls that I was mentioning before, you can see also in the background right now, some of these defensive walls that have stood the test of time and still mark the outline of Vatican City. Now, the building that we see now in the background was an old fortress. And actually, the highest point of the Vatican Gardens, Pope Pius XI and Guglielmo Marconi, inaugurated Vatican Radio's first broadcast there in that building, actually in 1931. And it became a vital voice of the free world during the rise of totalitarian regimes. And so Pope Pius XII's wartime messages appealed for peace and justice, while Vatican Radio also worked tirelessly to find information about prisoners of war and the missing, reading names for up to 70 hours a week. So after World War II, the broadcasts became the voice of the silent church in Central and Eastern Europe, where communist regimes persecuted Christians, and often Vatican Radio was often the only link between the faithful and the Pope. So now the cyclists are now making their way along Marian Way, as it's called, the Vatican portion of the Giro, that continues following these statues and mosaics of the Virgin Mary, under her many titles that tell the story of our civilization. So these images reflect suffering, but also salvation for individuals and entire peoples who have sought refuge in the intercession and care of the Mother of Jesus. The cyclists have actually just passed the Grotto of Lourdes, which last night hosted a rosary procession where Pope Leo closed the Marian month of May. And we see in the background the Vatican train station, and that massive building is a place where Vatican employees can go and buy perfumes, clothes, and all sorts of things. So we remember that the Vatican is a country, so it does have its own supermarkets and shops, and that is one of the shops that are open to Vatican employees. And actually now with the drone image you can see how green and lush the Vatican Gardens truly are, and how far back the city-state actually goes behind the basilica. And the cyclists are now passing by where the Vatican also has its court. So the Vatican has its own court building where trials are held. And we see them travel back around towards St. Peter's Basilica, and on their right, they're headed towards, Casa Santa Marta, as they make their way to exit this small country at the heart of Italy. And so we see them exiting. And once they exit, they will continue actually on their journey. Their competition will restart after exiting the Vatican. leaving the Vatican, the final stage of the Giro d'Italia begins, and it's the final 143 kilometers that the cyclists will continue to ride along. And again, they will pass through some more historic moments and historic sites throughout Italy, as it is, as we could call it, an open-air museum for the cyclists. And as we continue to see the cyclists riding off, leaving the Vatican and entering back into Italy, this actually ends our live broadcast of Pope Leo XIV's greeting of the cyclists participating in the 108th Giro d'Italia bike race. Now, to look back at this or any other papal events such as the Mass from this morning, please visit the Vatican News website, Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube accounts. My name is Kelsey Gussie, and it has been my pleasure providing the English commentary for you for this event. On behalf of Vatican Media and all of us here at Vatican Radio, we would like to thank our sound engineer, Gustavo Messina, and our audio coordinator, Massimiliano Menichetti, our TV partners, EWTN TV, Catholic Faith Network in America, Shalom World TV, Admir Darshan TV, Catholic TV, and also our listeners at Luminous Radio, who made this broadcast possible, and of course a special thank you to all of you for joining us today. And we wish all of our cyclists a special good luck as they continue. Laudetur Jesus Christus, praised be Jesus Christ.
Una cosa più invece passati lenti, ma mi vedi in qualche foto? Anche qui questi che...
Beh, sicuro. Quella di quando passano, sicuro.
Walter mi senti? Mi testi la 4 per favore? Se no te la sovraespongo.